feel good. I love it, Nick. It's always a new song. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Modern Day Apocrypha podcast. Tonight, we've got well, it might not be night when you're listening to this, but it's night now. I don't know how that's relevant, but...
Night's all relative.
I guess it's always night somewhere.
That's right. Isn't that Alan Jackson song?
I don't know anything about Alan Jackson.
It's 9 o'clock somewhere. It's 5 o'clock.
So, Modern Day Apocrypha karaoke edition.
Welcome. Today we're talking about what's on the horizon when it comes to China. China.
Yeah, I'm excited. Hopefully we talk about lo mein and good Chinese food somewhere in here, even though that's probably has nothing to do with our topic. But
you know what? I think that's something we can all just get on board with. Like, regardless of what the world's scenario is, like, let's just get some romaine. Romaine.
Lo mein. Different letter, bro. I already feel great about tonight. Yes, cheers, bro. So, Nick, what's going on with China?
I got a question for you, Tony.
Yeah.
In your opinion, do you think that as America has become more prosperous over the past, let's say, 100 years, do you think that prosperity that has inevitably resulted in technological innovation and, you know, the whole Silicon Valley era, you might say, is that good for the world?
Whew, that's a loaded question. Yeah, the look on your face says, I just threw a trapdoor in front of you. What are you going to do with it? I don't know. I think I've said this in other episodes, but for me, intention's kind of everything. I think we've talked about The Social Dilemma before, the Netflix thing. And so a lot of those guys started off with the intention of let's create something good. And then in the evolution of things, as times, as it happens, it turns out to be not as good, or there's unexpected or unforeseen circumstances. Kind of like, I don't know if you know much about like CRISPR technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with gene editing.
Yeah, so the people who invented it and came up with it was, hey, let's use this technology and create it with fixing diseases or stuff that, when people are born missing things, cool, now we can just copy, paste, and fix shit. Well then, other people see the technology and try to change it.
For the people that may not know what CRISPR is, can you just kind of elaborate on that? You said that you can just see things and change it. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, that's probably good. Thanks for making me explain stuff, because I can just run off. So CRISPR technology is super cool and exciting, but it's also kind of terrifying. It's the start of being able to design your own human. So basically,
through genetics and DNA.
So they can understand genetic code, similar to if you know how to build a website or any type of anything with like digital code, you can do that. They're learning how to do the same thing with DNA. So just like if you want to change your website and put a button or a different color or a different piece of functionality, you can do the same thing with your DNA to go, I want to change your eye color. I want to make you taller. I want to change your skin tone, hair color. I want to change your strength, whatever. When you're using that in a way to help with health, I think that's, that was the intention it was created for. And I think that's fantastic, kind of going back to where we started. But then other people go, designer babies. And then you go into the issue of like morality. Is that good? Is that bad? Until now, it's been you put one in the oven and see what pops out. And that's all you can do. And now we go, I want a baby that's this, that, and the other. And it makes you start to ask all those questions to go, is that healthy, being able to create individuals like that? So bring it back to your initial thing, to long answer that trapdoor question you threw at me. I think it has the potential to be good. And I think it's up to us as humans on how we create, or on how we make that good or bad for the world.
I think that was a brilliant answer, sir.
Thanks, man.
That was fantastic. Yeah, I agree. As I kind of thought through that myself, I mean, obviously there are pros. You've got solar power, let's just call it green energy in general. CRISPR is an amazing technology with some incredible capabilities. Imagine being able to sequence an individual's genome, not just like humanity's genome, but Tony Skinner's genes, and say, yep, you're susceptible to these 3 types of cancer and whatever else goes along with that. And then you edit Tony Skinner's genes. I'm not even sure how the process works, if it's like in the womb or whatever. Or no, I think it has to be done in vitro. Like you edit the cells and then implant it.
I'm not sure.
I'm not either.
I know enough to know the possibility, but not the specifics and how to do it. I'm not that smart.
Right there with you. But yeah, fascinating technology. But I mean, like, just think about the ramifications that could be involved in that, especially when you think about that conversation about morality. That actually might be a good conversation just to lay this one out with. Compare and contrast the way that the United States operates versus the way that China operates. And I want to be very hesitant and very cautious before we kind of dive into some of the things that might be more like American propaganda. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I've never been to China, so I don't know.
Exactly.
It's going to be perspective, but like everything, we're going to explore it anyway.
Yeah. And so like I want to approach this with a really open mind. But we can use like the Huawei as an example where, or China stealing intellectual properties and things of that nature. And so they, again, could be American propaganda, but seems like they do some things that are a little bit shady and whatever it takes to get a leg up. Now, I think they've been very intentional about some really smart ways to get a leg up on the rest of the world. So we'll dive
Pause you
into
for
some
just
of
a
that.
second.
Yeah.
America does shady shit too.
Yep, 100%.
Just want to make sure we throw that out there too.
100%. Just dive into the CIA. Spend 5 minutes looking at the CIA.
We definitely do some shady shit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a whole nother episode.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you. I just thought that was important to...
No, I think that was a good thing to throw in. So, but the question with like CRISPR to me comes in, you brought up morality and like, is it okay? Well, there might be some countries out there that don't have to cater to a population for permission to govern in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And those countries might just say like, fuck it. You mean we can make super soldiers? Done. Like, say no more.
Yeah.
And they just go full in on that. Whereas the United States might be left behind. And it might not be super soldiers. It might be remarkable intelligence. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you could code everybody to have a certain level of IQ. Everybody walking around in the country is Einstein level intelligent. And maybe that's possible, maybe it's not, but it seems likely with CRISPR.
Sure.
Or at least to go down that path. So it's almost like if you want to compete with the rest of the world, you almost have to. Like, let's look at baseball. When people were using steroids,
yeah,
if you wanted to be the best, which everybody in professional sports is getting paid to literally be the best, you had to cheat. You had to use steroids.
Someone explained the story of Lance Armstrong to me, who is super passionate about cycling, and I didn't understand it until he, gave me this long hour speech of the story and history of cycling, how the teams work, and it was fascinating. And they talked about, and they sat down as a team and said, everyone else is doing this. The only way for us to stay and compete is to follow suit and do the steroids and blood doping. All right, if we're going to have any type of chance, we're just going to jump in and follow suit.
Yeah, imagine, like, your job's on the line.
Mm-hmm. And so along those same lines, if one country starts genetically modifying for intelligence or strength, whatever it ends up being, and then another and another, do we have to keep up? I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Right, yeah. And so it's an interesting dilemma because it almost just completely excludes the morality conversation, regardless of whether or not that's particularly valid. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like you just have to once other countries start doing it. And then on more of like a personal level, this is something that is actually pretty inexpensive right now, but I would be shocked if the CRISPR type technologies were readily available to your average person. And so then it furthers that, like, right now there's a wealth gap. This would just exponentially increase that, because think about what the difference is between two generations of people. One class of billionaires, will say, that can go in and make sure that their 3 kids all have just remarkable intelligence, remarkable physical attributes, drive, like everything that goes with everything that's synonymous with success.
It insulates that wealth and resources, opportunity, and then those who can't keep up and don't have the technology to hack themselves, they're stuck, and their evolution is so much slower compared to people who are jumping light years ahead. And you're exactly right. That gap is so different.
Yeah, and so I think it'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out. And I think the counter argument to that, just to play like an even field, is, well, if you're a company that's offering CRISPR, you want to offer it to as many people as possible. So you're going to just naturally try to drive towards a lower cost to make it accessible. May or may not be the case. It all comes down to theory, but there's that argument to be made too.
Well, I think one interesting thing, as we're kind of on this topic, is kind of going back to that morality piece. And so you go into this weird fork in the road going, hypothetically, let's say moving this direction is immoral. You have to choose to either choose that moral choice, or, you know, allegedly moral right choice, and not participate, or choose an immoral choice to stay on board with everyone else so that you're in a place to make moral decisions. And so that's, to me, this really deep, how do you even choose?
Yeah, it's like, what do you do? And it's also talking about your children.
Yeah.
Like, you want to set a parent's number one job above anything else is to set your kids up for success. Whether that be like health or prosperity or whatever you define it as. Like, that's your job as a parent, you know? And so to consciously say like no to this or say yes to this, both have their own level of like guilt that might come along with that. So I want to digress and come back to kind of like the core of this topic, which is, where is America headed and where is China headed, and how does that play out in the global landscape, I guess you might say? Like,
Sure.
Because I don't want to make it all about the United States or all about China or anything like that, but the reality is that China has the highest population, America has the largest economy, and so there are just natural influences that come with being in those circumstances. And if you look at some of the projections, China's expected to have the largest economy in the next like 10 years or so.
Right.
I think as an American, or maybe it's even across Western civilization in general, not sure, but we see this whole like conversation getting played out where people are trying to make China the enemy.
Right.
And I feel like that's a little bit unjustified. Like, sure, they do some shady things. Sure, we do a shit ton of shady things ourselves. So I don't think that we're above or below anybody on like this.
I think it boils down to insecurity, though.
I think so too. Like, we feel threatened in our position.
And so for the longest time, this country's been on top. It's been the big dog. We get to go kick in whatever door and pretty much make what we want to happen, or right, wrong, whatever. That's been the case. And then now there's somebody else who's kind of at our heels and on track to overtake us and be either an equal or above us, you know, or surpassed us in certain ways. And when you've been, and you see this same story played out in so many different places, when you've been in charge for so long and not had to work, I see it in different circles of leadership too. You get leaders who are, they've done their work in their early days and now they're just kind of coasting. And then the new generation comes up and around and they feel threatened by it. So that might not be bad, but I'm threatened, so let me do what I can to discredit you or try to slow you down to insulate my cush position, and because I don't want to have to work and innovate to keep up with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because all you're doing is validating that someone else who's coming up behind you is exceeding you and maybe surpassed you or about to surpass you, even if it hasn't happened quite yet.
I think you hit it on the head. I think that's exactly where the United States is. I mean, we're coming fresh off the heels of that debate. Is that what that was?
Dude, I didn't even watch it.
Oh my God. It was unbelievable. We don't even need to get into that, but it's just like, this is, I feel like America in general has gotten a little bit, I don't want to say lazy because that's an overgeneralization on way too many people, because we do have some really genius, intelligent people that are doing really good things for the world.
But culturally, Americans are pretty fucking lazy.
Yeah, it feels that way anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the evidence would be to back it up, but it certainly feels that way.
And that's probably, arrogant of me to say that. But what is our culture made up of now? It's sitting in front of your television. It's fast food. It's consuming. Let me sit and have entertainment brought to me. And yes, that's not an honest statement across the board. You and I get out and do stuff, and I know lots of people who get out and do stuff, but if you think of your stereotypical American culture, it's sitting in front of my TV, it's playing video games, it's fast food, it's overindulgence.
Yeah. It almost feels spoiled.
Yeah.
Like that's the way that I feel as an American.
Or entitled, combination in there too.
Entitled, very much so. And I think that plays out in a lot of the domestic conversations that people have in the U.S. So here's kind of where I started questioning things. You heard about Foxconn, right? A few years ago, maybe this was like 10 years ago.
Refresh me, because I'm not.
So Foxconn is a company that was, I believe, making iPhone parts in China.
Yep.
Could be wrong on that. But what I am positive about is that they had such a large suicide rate.
Was that the place with the nets?
It's the place with the nets. And it's like, fuck, dude. You hear that, and it's like, yep, definitely don't want to live in China. But then if you do a little bit of self-reflecting, you'll go back to the early 1900s when we had the robber barons and children working in factories and all of the really bad working conditions that came along with industrialization. There are some pros and cons that came along with that. I'd say the biggest pro is that's what gave rise to the middle class. People weren't having to do subsistence farming and hunt to just sustain themselves. Instead, we were able to industrialize things, produce things at mass scale. That gave everybody employment, even if it was at low wages. They were still making income that they could go and spend on a little bit of entertainment. Right. And the cons, obviously, you had people being treated very poorly in really bad working conditions, children getting their fingers cut off in factories and stuff because they get caught in the gears. And again, this is, some stuff that I learned in school, so it could be, I don't want to call it propaganda, but it could be like an overstatement, make it kind of blow things out of proportion. But from my understanding, children used to be hired to get into some of the nooks and crannies of these large machines because they had the little hands that could do it. And then well, shit, that machine turned on, crunch, and it's like, that's fucked up.
Whew.
So
that is fucked up, bro.
Dude, it's really fucked up.
Yay, child labor laws.
Exactly, and so then that's where you see some of the regulation and stuff come in to keep that stuff in check.
Yeah.
So now let's take that to China. Well, they're working for pretty low wages. They seem like they're getting taken advantage of, but the economy's on the rise. And ultimately, if they follow down the same path that the United States did 100 years ago, then they'll have what's going to ultimately give way to a large middle class. And that comes with its own benefits. For one, I think the biggest thing is that you've got 1.4 billion people in China. And if we can get 1.4 billion people out of abject poverty, then I think that's a win for humanity, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get an argument from me.
So I like that.
Yeah.
And then what does a middle class do? Well, a middle class allows other businesses. It allows for the luxuries and leisure of time, if you want to phrase it that way. So people aren't having to focus on surviving, and instead they can shift their attention to thriving. And that's where you start seeing this massive technical innovation, because
they have energy and time frame to be creative and create, whether it be art or, like you said, technology, whatever that might look like.
Exactly. And that's why there's just an innate drive for humanity to have automation, because it frees you up. Imagine if nobody had to work, just period, ever again. I feel like it'd be kind of dull, but maybe you would have just some amazing creative works that just sustain themselves, and you keep going on a perpetual cycle.
Yeah, and I think it seems dull because we're ingrained in our culture and our current life experience that so much of your life, 40 plus hours a week, is devoted to whatever you're doing for work, or if you're going to school or whatever. And I think if we learned culturally, if we didn't have to do those things, we could create a whole new style of living.
Absolutely.
And so there's work. I think we would redefine work, because now it's, instead of working to sustain yourself or working for $1 to pay your bills and your house, if all of that was just not needed, well, now I would just, what am I creating?
Probably would have had a podcast about 3 years ago.
or whatever it is, or music, or you know what? I'm not going to go try to be a lawyer because there's money in it and whatever. I'm going to do what's passionate and what I have inside of me that I'm going to be really fucking good at. And I know that's probably a little altruistic to everyone to kind of imagine, and I don't know how it works, right? But I think it'd be a cool future to at least imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very future state. And I don't know that we'll ever get to that point. But yeah, so I think that's kind of the general consensus that I landed on anyway, was that this is probably a good thing for humanity that China's coming out of that impoverished state. And I think soon to follow will be India and Brazil and some of these other countries that have a strong economy with a large population.
So question on that, because I know for years, as we've gone through our industrial revolution and minimum wage laws and stuff, it's just not cost effective for us to create a lot of the shit we used to create. So we ship a lot of that manufacturing and production overseas. Well, now China is going through their own version of that, and it's getting too expensive to have China do it. So we see a lot of stuff getting shipped to the Philippines or Vietnam or some of these other countries. Follow every 100 years it's skipping, we're going to run out of countries. How do we solve that? Who's going to be the whipping boy when everyone else has had their industrial revolution? And I think that might be where automation comes in, because enough time comes in between this, skipping around from country to country, that hopefully the technology is there that, we don't have to abuse a culture to get our shit.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've got a couple different paths that we can go down, and I'll just lay a couple of them out and we can just go down them naturally. But
sure.
The first is a counter question. That question is, well, what happens when, or if, I think it's more likely a when, China becomes the sole economic superpower or global superpower? Because just like we've seen America exert its influence in ridiculous ways, would China do the same thing? And I think if you just look back at history, it just is a matter of fact.
And I think honestly, that's probably what we're most afraid of, is we know we've been shitty because no one can challenge us or tell us no since we've been at the top. And now that we see someone else coming along, we've not set a good example. And it's oh man, someone's gonna kick us in the dick.
So there's that aspect of it.
Yeah.
That kind of ties into your question about like, well, are we going to run out of countries? Because China could just completely change the world from what we're familiar with anyway, and it could just kind of disrupt the normal cycles that we're seeing right now. I think that time would inevitably come to its end as well,
Sure.
Regardless of what that looks like. But then the other piece is, would we continue down this cycle every 100 years or whatever the time frame is, finding another country to prop up and they just take on their hegemony?
Wait, what was that word?
Hegemony. Yeah, I wonder if I used that right.
I've never heard that word before.
Hegemony. Leadership or dominance, especially by one country or social group over others.
How do you spell it? Because I can't imagine how that word looks.
Hegemony.
And ladies and gentlemen, Nick, first place in the spelling bee.
Oh, shucks. Hey, that was cheating. I had to look it up. But so you've got that approach of like, what does China do? And then the other conversation that I think would be interesting is, well, let's say that China does develop this huge economic powerhouse of an economy. Just because they've got this huge economy doesn't mean that they'll all just be massively prosperous, because they could just be kind of stuck in that middle class phase if the United States continues to innovate and really look at what's on the horizon. Like, what's the next iPhone? And I know that's a very cliche kind of thought, but like, well, Apple is a $2 trillion company. I think they're valued twice as high as any other company in the world. And so you think about what that's done is like $2 trillion is 1/15 of all of the debt that the United States is in. That's an enormous
It's a lot of money.
company. Hell yeah, that is. So, like, if the United States can continue figuring that out, and I think that some of that path is, to your point, like automation or green technologies, I think the Tesla type companies that, regardless of what your opinion is of Elon Musk and how he operates things, Tesla's doing good things for people, for humanity.
Yep.
And that's kind of Elon's like mission statement. Is it's like, okay, we could lose Earth. Let's figure out how we can survive on Mars. And so, hence SpaceX. He wants to put a man on Mars, or won't. And then for Tesla, he's also like, but we can also make efforts to preserve the world that we have right now. So Tesla.
Yep.
And so I think that's the type of mindset that we need to have if we're going to sustain this privileged position, just because that's like, it's what's doing good things for humanity, and ultimately that should bleed over into all the other developing countries as well.
Yeah, and as you see all of the amount of oil and like fossil fuels and stuff that, I mean, globally we go through, and you know, the emissions and all the shit that does, and I mean, there's so many different factors that go into that, and it's not just consumption of oil, it's also cutting down huge sections of the rainforest that can process the CO2 that we're emitting, and so we're just fucking shit up for convenience. And so I know there's a lot of people, and there's been a lot of trend of, hey, how do we change and fix this? And you know, good things are coming up. I saw so many different companies. I think they said by 2024, 2025 or something, all these bigger companies had come out and talked about how they were switching to, or committing to, all of their vehicles being electric vehicles, or at least partially electric vehicles. Come that
You said country
timeframe.
or company?
Companies. I might have said country, but I meant companies.
Yeah, I know Lyft is by 2030, I think. 2035, maybe.
I think I saw Volkswagen saying something like that. I could be talking to my ass. Can't remember a specific company,
Sure.
but there was a trend going, hey, we're all getting on board, which is exciting, because I mean, that's only a piece of it though. That's only one industry, and we got to fix all that stuff.
Yeah, that'll have huge implications on the world. Imagine if there were zero car emissions.
Yeah, but dude, cruise ships.
Yeah.
When I saw that a cruise ship puts out the same amount of emissions a day as 1 million cars. Ah, damn it. I don't know if I want to go on a cruise, but I do.
Where are my electric cruise ships at?
Right?
Yeah. So, I think that's how you stay ahead. And what my hopes and dreams would be that any country that's in the position of influence, whether it's just one or the top 3 or 4, I would hope and pray that they use their privilege to actually innovate on the things that are like challenging humanity. Does that make sense?
I think Uncle Ben, man, great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. So, and then I know that we talked about this on a different episode, but we had discussed countries who don't have a GDP per capita of like $15,000 per year.
They don't care.
Don't give a shit about the economy because they've got to get food. First things first.
Environment, you mean, not economy.
So, yes, excuse me.
It's okay.
They don't care about the environment. Or maybe they do care, but it's just way down on the list of priorities.
When you yourself are starving and can't make ends meet, it's hard to care about anything other than yourself because you're forced into survival mode.
Right.
And you can only, that survival mode can't go past yourself or your direct circle.
Exactly. So, so I think that's path number 2. But if we go back to path number 1, which again was, what does this look like if China becomes the world superpower? Then I think you have to look at both how the United States has treated the rest of the world and what China is doing on a domestic front and an international front. So, I mean, that includes things anywhere from like their just general social policy of quote unquote communistic behaviors to military issues, whether that's with China or with the United States because of the influence that we just exert everywhere we go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's an interesting one to dive into.
Yeah. I just don't know which aspect I want to go for first.
So, yeah, I think it's almost like a loaded conversation because it gets into a lot of just conflicted ideas, maybe is the right way to put it.
And it's hard, right? So, if you think about the military aspect, right? I know the easy story that feels good and lets you sleep at night is that we go kick in doors around the world to make it a better place. And then, you see stories, true or not, that show a different side of the coin where maybe we go kick in the doors of other countries for self-interest and make it look like we're making it a better place. And, it's hard to get to the truth of things, which again is why we're here trying to discuss and look at a lot of this stuff. But historically, if we don't like something or something doesn't agree with our ideology, whether that's right or wrong, we go flex somewhere and try to say, hey, follow along our ideology. And I don't know, I'm not in those conversations. I'm not in backdoor high-level political conversations between countries and negotiations and all that. And I think few of us are.
Well,
yeah, okay, I'm sorry, Nick.
Okay.
Let me shut up and you explain to me how these conversations go. But so in my mind, first thing's like, well, let's have a discussion. How do we work together? And maybe we do that first, and then if that fails, we go kick in the door to force our ideology. And if I try to take that, if we distill it down between a country and a country, and all of the representative people and different ideologies within that distilled into a bigger collective, if you and I disagree, I don't, just show up and kick in your door and, fuck you, Nick, and start beating the shit out of you and go, hey, I wanted my tacos this way.
Right. Like, you gotta respect people's sovereignty.
Yeah.
You had mentioned something, this is months ago, so I apologize for putting you on the spot.
I don't care.
Something to the effect of how the United States is taking advantage of Middle Eastern oil assets in particular. under the guise of instilling democracy?
Oh, here we go. So a lot of this idea, and again, call me right, call me wrong, come to your own conclusion, but I had read, I have to come and take like 6-month breaks because of how heavy this book is. But the book you can check out is Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And it talks about how years ago when we developed the private sector in this country, how we were starting to get our hands slapped for the government doing shady shit. So we just did it with companies. And then these companies would go into underdeveloped countries and with great big salesman aspect and say, hey, we want to bring development in here and we want to raise you up and make your country better. And they go, okay, great. We can't afford that. Don't worry, we'll give you a loan. And then we go build up all of this infrastructure. And instead of helping them build up their own infrastructure, we go put our McDonald's in there. We go put our Apple stores in there. We go put all of our companies. So we're building an infrastructure to build us an income stream. And they're loaning us, or we're loaning them money to do it. So we're making money hand over fist. And we put such exorbitant interest rates on these countries that when they eventually default on the loans, because all of the infrastructure that we put there, they're not making money from. We're making the big cut of that. They default on their loans, and we go, okay, no problem. We'll take care of this. We just want your UN votes. We just want your natural resources for dirt cheap. And so we go through country by country doing this, and that is what a lot of countries don't like the U.S. for, is because there's a lot of that goes around back table. And then the other piece was, I forgot my thought, but there's enough loaded in there for you to unpack a little bit.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I don't know the ins and outs of the business policies and stuff that we've implemented overseas, but like it makes sense. And then just at its core, if we're not invited somewhere, this goes back to a morality question. So there's two sides to the argument, but if we're not invited to come into another country and help them, build them up as a country, whether that's infrastructure or economic or whatever it is, my personal view is that we shouldn't be there.
Sure.
But then you get into the conversation about like, well, what about when there's genocide and things like that? It's like, well, that's a pretty valid argument for being somewhere. But what I've witnessed in my short time here on Earth is an abuse of that. Like, the classic example of Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction that I think we never found.
But yet, here was a real idea, and here's the story we sold and went in there. And I want to add a clarifying thing. I don't hate the U.S. I don't think, everything is terrible. But, balancing with it, we have so many opportunities and goodness that we get to live here with. And sometimes it's just heavy or disheartening to understand the cost for that, or what, to sustain that, some of the shit we do at a global level so that we can all have iPhones and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. But I feel like we're harping on America a lot, but I think it's important for everybody to just recognize what we do and how we play out and abuse our power, because it's possible, if not likely, that happens to us at some point. Maybe that's 500 years down the road, but...
Well, I think it's a cycle, right? It's repeating a cycle. So if you look at how America got started, it was people who were being abused by power and taken advantage of. And so we went and created our own space and kicked out some other people, which we can get into in a different episode. And then now that we've come to a place where we've grown out, and instead of being better than what we got away from, we've recreated the same thing. And I think at some point, somebody who takes the lead has to do better. And whether that's we choose to do it while we're still in the lead, or China takes over, or somebody else takes over and goes, hey, and it's like stopping that cycle of abuse. You see that in like a child developmental thing. Typically, people or children who are abused or treated harshly grow up to do the same thing. That's because it's the system that they're given and they know how it works. And sometimes at a core level, it's, well, this was done to me and I didn't have a way to, fight back or whatever. So now I'm putting my aggression out forward instead of backwards where it probably should go. Or, you know what? There's this neat little thing called forgiveness. And you move on and create better. And I think that's what we need, but that's hard. And then to do that, it's hard for an individual to do, but then as a collective, shit, bro.
Well, what does forgiveness take? I think it takes trust.
Yeah?
Not
necessarily. Because I can forgive you and not trust you. I can say, you know what? I'm not holding this against you anymore. You've broken my trust. You got to earn that again. So I think forgiveness and trust are two different things.
I think they're two different things, but I think they play off of each other.
Explain.
For example, I don't think that if you've forgiven somebody, but you don't trust them, then I don't think that's true forgiveness. I think that's your ability to move on and find other priorities to waste your time and energy on.
Maybe there's just levels to forgiveness then.
Could be. Because I've dealt with that on personal issues and kind of sat down and was like, well, I can get over something and just move forward. And is that forgiveness? Maybe. But is it forgiveness if I still don't trust the person and that I wouldn't let my guard down? To me, that doesn't sound like forgiveness because I'm still building up that wall and I gotta protect myself from whatever may happen from that.
So just because you forgive someone doesn't mean that they've changed and are worth being trusted again.
Sure.
For me, forgiveness is I'm not holding this against you, but it doesn't mean I'm naive enough to go, hey, do it again.
That's a good point. I'm not holding this against you. Yeah, so I think you won me over with that one. So we talked a lot about how the United States plays out in, the global landscape. And I think that can be a whole other conversation in and of itself. But then, let's shift our focus to China. And for China, I think they've done a damn good job of intentionally positioning themselves to become what they are.
Yeah, they've worked very hard and been very strategic. And I think that goes back to their ideology, where here in America, we think about today, maybe tomorrow. And, and if you find someone who's a, long-term thinker, they've got a 5-year plan. China historically thinks in dynasties.
Yeah.
They think in a 1,000-year time frame. So if you've got a plan that looks out 1,000 years and says, here's where we want to be, obviously that's way past what you can do in a single lifetime. But you really subscribe culturally to here's this plan. Well, if we want to be way out here in 1,000 years, here are all the steps and here are all the milestones and landmarks we've got to hit in 800 years, in 400 years, in 50 years. It's really easy to stay consistent and go, nope, here's what we do, here's what we focus on, and here's where we march towards. And I think that's what has helped them position themselves so effectively.
And they started from, decades ago, maybe centuries ago.
Yeah.
And so it's different. You hear Germany and they wanted to have their Third Reich that was going to last for 1,000 years. And I haven't researched this, but it seems like they were like, we'll start this in 3 years.
Yeah.
And let's hit the ground running. China's a whole different animal. They've been very deliberate with good and bad ways, smart and malicious ways of approaching this.
But still calculated.
Yes, very calculated. And they had an agenda, and I feel like the United States has just been sleeping and not paying attention to some of that. But I think a lot of the conflict and the reason why the U.S. is so opposed to China is, one, because we feel threatened that our position's at risk. And two, I think it dates back to Cold War type issues.
Tell me more.
democracy versus communism.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's almost like a holdover of that.
So it's core level ideology change.
Yeah. And so what I would just challenge humanity to say is, who the fuck cares? Like, who cares if China is communistic or if Russia is communistic or if the United States is a democracy? Like, let them be a country.
Well, and I think that goes back to, we've talked about this in other episodes about that idea of respecting an individual and their differences. And so if we can do that on a collective level, on looking at a country and respecting their differences, it's a really boring, ugly world if everyone looks the same. Everyone's just a clone and a robot. There's no contrast. There's no beauty. You can't make art from that. It's all boring. Everyone looks the same. That sucks. Instead of being so, I think it goes down to insecurity. I don't like me, or I'm not fully convinced that I've got the best way there is to live or be at an individual or a country level. I'm so insecure about that. I need everyone around me to validate me, so everyone else look like me, so I know I've got it right.
Right, and we're the best ones at doing it too.
Yeah. Well, what if we just go from this place of, you know what? Here's what we do. Here's what we're good at. Here's what we like. They do things differently, but maybe we can learn from them.
Exactly. Yeah. If you have more diverse ideas, then you can look at them and say, "Oh, that one worked," or "That one works for them, but wouldn't apply to us," etc. So you can just have an intelligent progression of civilization. And so I think going back to the conversation about China being very deliberate with this, I think it kind of started with Mao Zedong, and he had a concept called the Great Leap Forward, which was supposed to propel China into like a proper communistic society and out of the agrarian economy.
And what's agrarian is?
Like farm-based.
Okay, that's
so,
what I thought.
And that's, kind of like what we're talking about. Like we'll call it industrialization, but industrialization refers to just like the machinery and things like that. But that had its flaws and ultimately failed and resulted in like this massive famine, which you can look into, that it killed, like, estimates are as high as 55 million people. And so it's pretty significant. But I think China's kind of figured out the next iteration and said, okay, well, if we can control intellectual property, so those are the things that, like patents, that
give podcasts,
the things that give United States companies a competitive advantage because we've got all of this innovation. And so we start seeing China kind of taking some of those ideas and implementing them for themselves. We see China trying to position the yuan, which is their currency, in a position of power, not so much like trying to just overtake the dollar directly, but almost indirectly. Like, I think they just recognize some really shitty economic policies, and they're like, oh, well, they're going to fuck it up for themselves, so we can just make sure that we're sustaining a good economy, and then the yuan will be a powerful currency.
Yep.
And with that, of course, comes more like hegemonic ability, you might say. There's a different word that I was looking for, but we'll move on. Reserve currency is what I was talking about. It allows them to position themselves with the reserve currency, and
then when other countries have that have your currency as a reserve currency, what you do and how you act has more weight and more of a voice globally, because now my economy is being propped up because in my treasury I'm holding your currency to give value to my economy.
Exactly. Yep. So my interests are everyone else's interests.
Exactly.
And so that's where you see some pros and cons. It's good being in that position, but can be abused, as we see today. But I don't want to make it all about economic stuff. So we also see, I think, China's in intellectual war, and not intellectual property, like the Creative Commons and stuff like that, but I mean, like, they want to know what every other country is doing and take advantage of that. And so I started kind of thinking, the United States invests a shit ton of dollars in military, but I don't think that's the future. I don't think future wars are going to be fought by blowing each other up. I think it's going to be fought with technology and economic battles. Like, I think we're starting to move out of that era of humanity.
And I think that's also what that book, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, talks about. Because if you go into these countries and you have their economy by the balls, dude, I don't even have to show up with troops. Because if I just turn off your ability to feed your people or to send electricity or whatever, why do I have to show up with a gun? It still sucks because it's still control, but it's a more elegant form of control because now I'm not, kicking in and killing people.
It fits within the UN's permissions.
Sure.
Like, they're like, yeah, well, you're not invading them.
Yeah.
That's
And
how it feels.
I think that also ties into why we see all of these, true or not, but this propaganda mess of China's evil and Russia's fucking with the elections, and that's level of warfare now is because we're trying to shift and move things from a let's just kill people.
Which is good.
It is good. It's just new and confusing to navigate, especially when you're unaware that it's going on. And
yeah, it's much more sneaky.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So, I guess here's my question. Let's say China becomes this global influence, this global power. Oh, I think they already are a major global influence.
I'd agree.
Do you think that they stop? Like, what could they possibly want? Just like the United States wants natural resources, and we kind of abuse our position to achieve that. Do you think that's going to be the same with China? In the sense that they might want to take over territories and actually possess land?
I don't know.
Or do you think it's more like they want to influence their ideologies?
I don't know if it would be either, honestly, because like you said, I think we're kind of past the Alexander the Great type. I need to put my stamp in own land. As we talk about intellectual property and in influence, influence 1,000 years ago looked like I control these borders. Influence today, real influence, is different. It's more like a reserve currency. It's UN votes and stuff like that. So I think the move is influence, and along with influence, its ideology can fall into that. But I think it's bigger than just everyone think how I think. That's got to be part of it. But I think it's more let me move and adjust, whether resources is part of it. But I don't think it's a let's put my flag over here in this mine. No, you can have it. I just own what's in it. You see the difference there?
No, can you elaborate?
Yeah. So instead of me having to go and physically go kick in the door and put my military around whatever natural resources, a gold mine, an oil well, no, it's yours, but
lithium to make batteries.
Yeah.
I heard that's a big thing in Mexico.
Avocados, whatever. No. You can run that. You can own that. But maybe you owe a tax of that resource to me because now it's my influence that's here. And sure, historically, a way to enact that influence was through physical presence and military muscle. And I think that's still relevant for today. But I think as we're moving forward, I think that stuff fades away in the next, I don't know, might be a few hundred years. But
yeah, I think it's almost like we're on track to be a more united world.
I'd hope so.
I sure do too. And I think we'll get to that in just a minute, but I want to comment on what you were talking about where like it may not be a huge priority to possess land. And I think that's largely true. I've got a couple things that make me second guess that.
Okay, let's hear it.
One is, I think that's easy for us to say, and easy even if you're China to say,
Yeah.
because you've got a massive country with a lot of natural resources. But if you're a country that sits on, let's say, in a desert, you don't have the stuff to feed your population because you're in a desert, and so you have to import things, and so there's a big imbalance. And so if you're one of those countries, you might look at these other countries and say, yep, we need that river or something like that. I don't know that that's as critical as we become more globalized.
Sure. And I think the move there is just like if you look at it on a smaller scale, how do you as an individual business owner differentiate yourself and still bring value? It's the same thing for the country. It's cool. If I don't have resources, how do I position myself as a country to still bring value so that I can trade my value for the resources I need?
Yeah, you got to get creative.
Yep.
And then the second thing that makes me second guess that is China's building a massive military. I don't know if you've looked into it, but I've read a couple articles. One is that I don't know which one I want to start with. Start with this one. So the first is that China's Navy has overtaken the United States Navy in terms of the number of ships.
Okay.
And they've been doing a lot of exercises in, I think it's the Yellow Sea. Could be wrong on that. Could be a different one off the coast of China. And then they're really like exerting their influence over Taiwan, and we just saw what happened in Hong Kong a few months ago, and they just aggressively took that over. But I think a lot of that has ties to just a general social and economic influence that Hong Kong has. I mean, it's one of the wealthiest sovereign city-states.
Sure.
Not anymore, I guess.
Well, I think as far as the growth of that military, if you're looking at trying to play on the same level as the U.S., one of the U.S.'s biggest things that has made nobody fuck with us has been our military is so much bigger. Like, what is our defense budget is more than the next 3 or 10 countries combined. So in order to, if you're trying to look at this economic standpoint and, hey, you know what, we want to be a player, the easy move for the U.S. says, no, our military is bigger, fuck off. All right, in order for us to not do that, whether hopefully it doesn't turn into an actual physical, like, guns blazing scenario, because that would be just bad for the world. Mm-hmm. Hey, we've matched you here. You can't just do that anymore.
You can't be a bully.
Exactly.
I just learned jujitsu. You can't bully me anymore. That's kind of what it comes down to. Yeah, I think you're right. And then we also see China strategically align themselves with countries like Iran. They were doing military drills in partnership with Iran.
And they've been best friends with the U.S. forever.
Yeah. I was like, wait, what? But yeah, and so it makes me raise an eyebrow, but I think the larger conversation here is the economic and like technological advancements, and I think that's where we're going to see power be derived.
And I think it's easy for us, especially, you know, growing up, I've heard so many things, the TV, the news, Iran's bad, Iran's the devil. Take good, bad, right, wrong out of it. They're different, they're the other side. If we have our team, they're on the other team, of course the people that are on the other team are going to try to band together to be able to stand on their own, right?
Just like the EU.
Yeah, again, I'm not advocating for or against the U.S. or China and Iran. I'm trying to take the emotion out of it and just say, hey, this is logical. Just like, you know, flip the coin. If we were someone trying to be the up-and-comer and try to play in the same field as this other big guy, girl, entity, oh, well, these other people have been fucked with, they're an easy ally. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, cool. Well, this is an easy friendship to have because they're going to help us achieve our goal of playing on the same field. So taking out the emotion, taking out the demonization of feeling that threatening stuff that comes down and makes us feel and cloud our vision, oh, that makes sense. How we navigate it, that's a different conversation. I don't know. But let's uncharge that perspective.
That was fantastic, because I think that explains a motive that might be not the mainstream motive that we would see. Like kind of what I was describing. It's like, well, they're aligning with their enemies, and it's like, you feel threatened by that. But again, to your point, it's like, well, I've never been fucked around with by Iran.
Yeah.
I play a stupid game called Clash Royale, and I see people from Iran all the time, and it's like, hey, good game. That's it, you know, like you just go on with your lives. And you're absolutely right. So like, I think we need more of that. So I think that kind of brings me to what I'd like to see more of, and that is, for myself included, as I just mentioned, like, let's start perceiving other countries as the person on the other side of a chessboard. Like, they're just the same type of player in the same game, and you just don't want to lose. Like, so let's play the game and move our positions, be logical and strategic about it, just like I think China's done.
Yeah.
And they've done a good job at it.
Or, next level thought here, let's change the game. Because chess is defined as having a winner and a loser at the end. Yeah, maybe you might get into a draw, but what if we don't have to define a loser? And I know that takes, we're a long ways off from that. I know that's not a present reality, but how do we move towards that? And instead of trying to fight and overcome, how do we all win together?
You almost grabbed exactly what I had written down about halfway through this podcast. I wrote down, here's the call to action. How do we look at other countries as partners?
Fuck yeah, dude.
So I think we came to the exact same conclusion there. And so I think that ties into that conversation about, like, where is the world headed as a whole? Sure, we might have more wars in the coming years or whatever comes along with that. But like, if you look at the next 200, 300, 800, 1,000 years, it's going to come to the point where everybody's everywhere. There aren't just resources to just go take, or there are, but like, it's people live there, and I think we're on a progressive track to recognize humans as humans.
Hopefully.
And it feels that way.
No,
I could be wrong.
I'm with that.
But I think it's going to start kind of coming down to more and more partnerships, more and more collaboration, and a mutual understanding of, hey, let's help each other up. Because when we do, we get 1.5 billion people out of poverty, and that means that that's 5 times the amount of people that have been innovative in America. 5 times more are doing it over in China, and that's gonna bring things like the internet. Like,
and when you're not so arrogant or insecure or thinking egotistical,
yeah,
I have to come up with all the solutions. Fuck that. That's exhausting. You know what? Let me bring my piece to the table, but also give room for other people to bring their piece to the table, because you know what? Maybe I just brought the bread for the meal. I didn't have to cook the whole damn thing. Everyone brought their own piece, and now we all get to enjoy it together. But when I'm the only one bringing it, I'm the only one thinking about it. It's so segmented. It's so much smaller. You limit your possibilities. But when you allow other people to bring their solutions and inventions, creations, exactly what you were saying, let's be excited about other people's potential instead of threatened that it's not our own.
Look, here's the deal. If I were responsible for creating a potluck from beginning to end, I'd have some damn good chess squares and some real shitty food everywhere else. It's kind of the same thing with globalization. I think there's some damn good technologies here, some really good technologies here, and everybody bring together what they're best at.
Yep.
This is a good one. I enjoyed the conversation. I'm curious to see how all of this unfolds, what kind of time frame we're on. But I think the big takeaway is that I hope that this is a good thing for humanity as a whole.
I do too. And I think things are what we define them to be. And I think if we choose as individuals and then collectively as a country to say, I'm going to identify with the insecurity that I might not be, and my people and my tribe and my country might not be the top dog anymore, it's going to be a bad thing, because that's your perspective and you're going to react and fuck whoever's trying to come at you. If we individually and then collectively say, no, this is a good thing, because we don't have to do it all ourselves anymore. We've paved enough of a way of possibility, and sure, we haven't gotten it all right along the way. I'm not arrogant to think that. But we've done a lot of good things and paved the way for some opportunity. Why do we have to be the only ones that have the opportunity? And if we define that as a good thing, as, oh, fuck yeah, someone else is catching up, this is exciting, now we get to carry that together, and then the next country, and then it's the whole world, and then fuck yeah, it's a better place.
Well, then it iterates again. It's like somebody else starts figuring out some really powerful technology, and they rise to power, and it's like, well, guess what? They've got a really good technology that everybody else can use.
Well, as an individual, there's been lots of different things I've learned in my life, and there's so many different paths. There's the paths that you got to cut yourself. It's fucking exhausting. But at the end of it, you know the ins and outs of it because you cut that path. And then there's other things you learn where you can start cutting your own path, or you go, shit, someone's already made a highway. I won't run down this shit and pick up what they've learned and what they've figured out already, because then I can, at the end of their path, keep moving it forward and spend my energy on progression instead of reiterating the wheel. If we look at that at not an individual perspective, but at a global perspective again, progress will happen quicker.
Progress will happen quicker. I agree. I think you closed it.
Well, tell us your thoughts. Hit us up on social media. Tell us what you agree with, disagree with, and we'll catch you all next week.
Cheers.